So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Leading Your People, Your Troops with Impact. It's really lovely to have you here this evening. So thank you so much for joining me. There's a lot of you on the line tonight. And it's really lovely to see that some of you come from so many different areas. There's a couple of you from the UK on the line, which is really exciting and interesting. One of you from the States, and two of you from New Zealand, and the rest of you from Australia. So really, really warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to be here with you. I thought what I would do is I'd just introduce myself very briefly. Some of you I know, but there's many of you on the line whom I don't know. So I thought I'd just give you a very brief introduction to who I am and what I do. And then I'll talk to you a little bit more about the key attributes of exemplary modern day leaders. So just as a way of introduction, who am I? My name is Karen Walsh. I run an organization called Pure Magic International Business Solutions, and I do international leadership development, team development, and I do a lot of executive coaching. I work on 3 continents around the world. I work in Africa, I work in Fiji, and I work in Australia. So really, really blessed and really happy to do the work that I do, love the work that I do. I've been essentially developing leaders to grow organizations probably for the last, I hate to say this, but also almost 3 decades. That's pretty scary. But I think one of the beautiful things about being given that opportunity is to be able to work with a very, very diverse range of leaders, diverse range of industries, people, and really just watching a lot of people thrive in the jobs that they do. And so it's been a really remarkable career and been really lovely to be able to do that. And my focus really has been over that time on developing leaders and teams. I think that we often focus on leaders, but one of the key things when we talk about leaders is that you really don't have a leader unless you've got teams or people working with that leader. So I think if you're going to work in an organization and really have organizational productivity and sustainability, it's making sure that not only do the leaders do a good job, but in that process you've got them leading great teams, because without the teams you're not going to get far as an organizational leader. I also believe that obviously greater and more impactful results are obtained through teams that work well together, and I've been able to have the privilege of working with many teams and many regions and many organizations, and as I said earlier, many different countries really, where I've been doing team development. And I think that, you know, when I talk about team development, it's actually taught me a great deal about human behavior. My opportunity to work with teams and ultimately leaders has taught me a lot of things about how to help leaders lead better and teams become better teams. And I think the opportunity to watch the dynamics of the two has been a really, really interesting journey around watching human behavior. But also I think one of the key things is watching leaders who really do it and well versus leaders who really don't lead well at all or don't lead full stop. And to watch the stark difference between the two, because it is stark. I write ebooks, I write a column, I do a lot of conference speaking. I speak at about 20 conferences a year, and I write for the international and the Australian media on a range of different topics. Just some of the organizations and a couple of fun shots of people with whom I worked. So there are some of my colleagues or clients in Fiji. There are some of my, one of the pictures on the right-hand side was a carers retreat I ran. I do lots of carers retreats, and that's just really, really fulfilling work, and work with a whole range of different, as I said, sectors, organizations, and ultimately nations. And what's interesting is that sometimes, and I'm sure you do, because obviously you're on the line because you are leaders, or you people who are interested in becoming leaders, or you might be emerging leaders. But often I'm asked, Karen, I wake up in the morning as a leader and I think I don't know which is the right way up, you know, because I think leadership can be a very exhausting job. I think it can be very lonely. And I think if you're going to lead well, sometimes you have to make a really hard decision, stand a tough line on things. And I think sometimes it actually sways our confidence. Are we doing the right thing? You know, do we doubt ourselves? Do we think, well, which way is the world up? Or sometimes we think we're having a bad hair day. You know, I just can't seem to get it right, Karen. I'm so tired of trying, or, you know, nothing seems to work. So much so that I've got to go back into work today and I feel as if my hair stands on the top of my scalp, which it does, but not quite like this guy. And then you get the other one who says, leading my team is hard work. I think leadership is hard work, ladies and gentlemen. I've never, pretended that it's not. But I think if you can get the basic strategies and skills and competencies right, I think that leadership can be enormously enjoyable, productive, and beneficial. I think it's when we haven't got the right strategies or the competence, really, the understanding of what leadership is and how to lead well, and what the difference is that, for example, what is the difference between a K leader, an average leader, and an exemplary leader? And what is it that an exemplary leader does, or what are those attributes that they have that makes them so skilled at what they do? And I often am asked, so who do you think, Karen, who would you regard as a great leader? And I was watching a documentary the other night, and I've looked at this man from afar since he was in office. And I think that he has to be one of the most polished and one of the most emotionally intelligent leaders of modern day times. Now, you may not necessarily agree with his policies, and that's absolutely fine, but as I watch him as a leader, as a man, I think he absolutely is a shining star, and I'm referring here to Barack Obama. I watched a documentary on him the other night, literally 2 nights ago, and he was talking about his days in the White House and leading a country and his greatest regrets and his greatest, achievements. And one of the things, and obviously in the documentary, they're asking his staff and his chief of staff and his senior advisors, and what came through really, really appropriately all the time was this man's absolute calm. He's just emotionally in control. And when I talk about emotionally in control, I'm not necessarily saying so emotionally controlled that he can't express exuberance or happiness, no, but he doesn't allow things to flap him. He's very measured, he's very tempered, he's very polite, and I just love the way that he holds himself. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of his characteristics as I go through the webinar. But as we do go through, if there's any questions that some of you have, please feel free to shoot through them, and I'll answer them as we go through, as opposed to necessarily holding them back till the end of the webinar. So let's then look at exemplary leadership and what exemplary leadership is and what it looks like. So there are many models of leadership that have been designed over time. There are countless new gurus that add their slant to what exemplary leadership might be and how to get it. And what's really interesting, it doesn't matter how many of the greatest sort of Harvard Business Reviews I read, or the greatest research, or, the newest findings, it all really boils down to the same thing. So I think once you understand what exemplary leadership is and how to attain it, I think it's really about keeping it simple. As I say, the new theories and the new research, it's all great and wonderful, and I think adds greater dimensions to a basic definition of exemplary leadership. But ultimately, if you get the basics right, you get to be exemplary. And some of the new models are good, some are outdated, some are new. But as I say, basically, it's to keep to the basics. When we talk about leadership, there are 8 different styles of leadership. When we're talking about things like, for example, servant leadership, transformational leadership, transactional leadership. I won't get into that today or tonight because that's not really what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about that regardless of the model of leadership that you might aspire to or to which you might follow, I'm really talking to you about, so what are the personal characteristics today of those leaders who I work with, or those leaders who I come across that I think, yep, you're pretty exemplary, or pretty average. And I think that, at the risk of being a little bit cheeky, I think it's having worked with, it must be literally thousands of leaders over the years, that I think that if you do that sort of work, or any of us do work for a long period of time, over time, I think we get good at it. So I think what I'm saying is I'm able to quite easily pick out what is an exemplary leader in an organization, or to identify those emerging leaders who would make exemplary leaders based on a couple of basic common characteristics or attributes. So exemplary leaders, when I talk about what do they do, one of the models, essentially, yes, it's a model of leadership that I like, is based on the work of 2 people called Kouzes and Posner. And they wrote a book called The Leadership Challenge, and they did a lot of research around leadership. And ultimately, their leadership model comprises 5 different things that exemplary leaders do. So if you want to grab a pen and a piece of paper and just jot these down, because I use this work a lot, and I also use the work of Stephen Covey a great deal. So Stephen Covey, he wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but one of the works that he's actually notoriously known for as well is a book called Principle-Centered Leadership. And he was a great influencer on my younger years when I was studying leadership, and I was put into a very senior leadership at a very young age. I was about 23 years of age, and I was put in charge of 600 people. Never know how I got that right, but anyway. And I used Stephen Covey's work to guide me a great deal. So coming back to the slide in front of us, model the way, this is all about literally modeling the way. So, you know, being the person or being the leader that you want to be. It's how you behave, it's how you speak, it's what you do when people are not watching, you know, exemplary performance all the time. We all make mistakes, we're human, but it's about thinking about what you say, thinking about what you do, you know, not losing your temper and getting angry easily. Doing the right thing, being the sort of person that people want to follow, because you always are seen to do the right thing. You're always seen to give everything your best shot. Even though you make mistakes, you model the way and people want to follow you. You inspire a shared vision. So I talk so often about this in organizations all the time. I was working with a board a couple of months ago, and this board was a board of a huge organization employing over 9,000 people, right? And I had been called into the board, and they wanted me to help them write a strategic plan for the organization, no problem. And one of the first questions I said to them was, well, so what is the vision of the organization? And the one gentleman said, oh, it's got something to do with, I think it's, well, the disability. And I said, oh, okay. So I said to the other 8, because there were 9, could you tell me what the vision is? Well, it's something to do with, you know, good customer service. Well, what I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, and there's a lot of you on the line tonight, is that not one of them could tell me what the vision of the organization was. So here's the thing, right? If we're talking about exemplary leaders, if you don't know what the vision is of your department, of your team, of your organization, don't expect people down the line to know. And so you can't row the boat of your team or your organization towards your destination and get the people in your team in the boat with you to help you row if you don't know where you're going. And it sounds like such a small little thing, but if you're in charge of a small department of 4 people, have a vision. Tell your people what the vision is, or even better, create a vision with them so everybody has buy-in to where we're going. But really think about, as a leader, whatever level you're at, do the people who work directly under you know exactly what it is that you are striving to achieve? Do they know what they are striving to achieve? And do they know exactly why we're all in this boat together? If not, well, then you're not really being an exemplary leader in terms of inspiring a shared vision. Challenge the process is the third one. And I say this time and time again. There is so much complacency in organizations, so much of this, I love this. So why do you do this? Oh, well, we do this because we've always done this. Well, why have you always done it? I don't know, Karen. We've done it because we've always done it. So we keep on doing it because we've always done it. And I think one of the greatest enemies of modern day organizations is complacency and history. History about, well, we've always done it, so we'll continue doing it. Challenge the process. So it's about working smarter, not harder. Are there better ways we can do things? Can we work more intelligently? Can we work more effectively? Are there new ways of doing things or completing things that we can be more creative and productive in our working together collaboratively? Challenge the process on an ongoing basis. Enabling others to act, I think one of the most difficult things that leaders have, or more importantly, those leaders who don't lead very well, are people who do not delegate. So they hold things close to their chest, and very often they'll say to me, well, I don't give it to John, or I won't give it to Jane because they don't do it properly. If John and Jane don't do things properly, ladies and gentlemen, it's a leadership issue. So if you've got leaders who say, well, I'm going to do it because what's the point of giving it to them? And how often do I hear that, if I want a job well done, I might as well do it myself. Well, if you want a job done well and you're leading a team and you might as well do it yourself, you shouldn't be in a leadership role. Or what it means to me is that you're not enabling your people to act. In other words, the role of the leader is to be the umbrella above the team. The team are the people who actually do the work. The leader does the strategy. So if the leader's doing the work and not the strategy, there's a complete mishmash about who's doing what. Greater delegation, ladies and gentlemen, upskill your people, develop them into a role and competencies and capabilities that they can do what they're supposed to so that they can perform well and highly in their role. And encourage the heart. There's nothing better than passion. You know, talk about things, compassion and passion, actually. You know, I was talking at an organization the other day around passion and everything that we do. And if you look at really the history of so many things that have been achieved in the world, so much is it about passion, you know, from things like Steve Jobs and Apple to Mahatma Gandhi and leading India, to Mother Teresa. You know, so many things in leadership, when we talk about exemplary leaders, have been through passion and compassion, that I think very often it's about, you know, try and encourage a lot of compassion or passion in your team. What are they like? What are they passionate about? What would they like to do? Encourage the heart, because I think that in terms of getting your people on board and behind you, passion and compassion are certainly two key aspects to have in modern day exemplary leadership. Okay, so those 5, and as I said, it comes from the source of Koussis and Posner. They wrote the Leadership Challenge. So let's just have a look at modern day exemplary leadership. Now there he is, the lovely Robert Mugabe. Robert Mugabe is an interesting man. What can I say? Interesting is such an interesting word, really, isn't it? He is, when we talk about good or bad leadership, often when I'm training or when I'm talking at conferences and I'm talking about leadership, I try and be a little bit cheeky by bringing in examples that might be exemplary, but also examples of leaders who I think are absolutely poor. Really, or not even, well, they're not leaders. I think many of them are murderers, but forget about that in terms of, it's an interesting concept around exemplary leadership, because if you talk about these, so exemplary leadership skills can be used for good and evil. You know, when I'm talking about Hitler, I often talk about, so was Hitler a good or a bad leader? And I'd be interested. I'd be really interested in, there's a lot of you on the line. Some of you tell me, just write to me, was Hitler a good leader? What do you think? Okay, interesting. So Sarah, you say good. Yeah, I think it's a really good concept around that. Why do you say he was good, Sarah? A good leader. Okay, so I think it's a really interesting thing, because often when I'm asked, that's Brett, often when I'm asked, Brett, so what about Hitler? Why is it that he was good? And Sarah, you're saying because he managed to have his team do what he wanted them to do. Absolutely, he did. So when we talk about Hitler, he was actually in many ways an exemplary leader. He was very charismatic. He had an absolute strategy and vision. He was devoted to what he wanted to achieve, and he massed the people. So in definition, he was a great leader. Stalin. I was watching this documentary. He took his followers along with him, says Brett, and had a vision for his organization. Absolutely. And I think that's right, Brett, he did. I think the issue around him, though, is that if anybody actually went against his vision, well, that was the end of them. So one of the things we talk about when we talk about the Hitlers and the Stalins of the world, they are people who are exemplary leaders, but because they used it for evil, ultimately, they became butchers and murderers. And ultimately, then, exemplary leadership was not what they remembered for, as opposed to somebody like Winston Churchill or Douglas MacArthur. So I think it's a really interesting thing around, and this is an important point, ladies and gentlemen. It's about intent. And this is what I want you to just, maybe if you've got a notebook with you, what is the intention behind the leader? What is your intention when you're leading your people? Is it for the good of the team, of good of the organization, or do you have other prerogatives around why you're leading? Stalin, by the way, I never really realized this until I was watching something on television about 6 months ago, that more Russians were killed in the Second World War than any other nation. And I think it was about 220 million Russians over the Second World War period were killed, and a lot of them because of their leader being Stalin, which I was absolutely gobsmacked. Pol Pot, the killing fields, Idi Amin. So I won't labor the point here, but Robert Mugabe was obviously he's still in power. Now, Robert Mugabe is interesting. He's 91, I think, 91. And with his 90th birthday last year, he spent, I think it was 90 million Zimbabwean dollars. Now, that might not be a lot of money, admittedly, but it's still a lot of money if you're living in the country, on celebrations and on birthday cakes, whilst 90% of his country is starving. One of the things he does not well is he's quite racist, and he will make racist comments about people who are not of a black color scheme, right? Fair enough if that's what he wants to do. But if you're thinking about people like Nelson Mandela, when Nelson Mandela came out of jail, he had been in jail my entire life, and I was living in his country. What was interesting about him is that he was put into jail because ultimately he was deemed to be a terrorist because of apartheid, and that's a whole other discussion. But when he came out of jail, he was so engaging and so forgiving, to the extent that he was not prepared for the black South Africans to change the color, the color and the design of the Springbok rugby jumper, which had been designed by the white apartheid supremacists. So that is what you would call an exemplary leader. He came out of absolute oppression, forgiving and trying to collaborate. Whereas Robert Mugabe talks about barriers today, international, he says the only white man you can trust is a dead man. Now, people might say, well, there you go, he could be exemplary because he's wanted the best for his people and he's, been a fantastic statesman. He has not. He has starved his people and he's a racist. So I'm trying to show you examples here of supreme exemplary leaders, i.e. Mandela and a Churchill, versus those who would use exemplary leadership against the common good of all, being Mugabe, Hitler, Stalin, etc. And yet I think it's really important that on the line you really think about actually to be very clear that they all were, certainly at the beginning, had great exemplary leadership skills. So I think I've made myself clear. Okay, so what I want us to do is, let's do this, because there's probably about 60 of you on the line at the moment. That's a lot of people. But what I'm going to do is ask you to grab a pen and a piece of paper, and let's go through what I believe and also research. So I've sort of added my own where I think it's important, the 20 attributes of highly effective leaders. So what I want you to do is grab a pen and a piece of paper and score yourself for each of these out of 10. Okay, so as I go through them, if you think you're absolutely great, you score 10. And if you think you're pretty crummy at that particular thing, score 1, obviously. So the idea behind this exercise is to really be honest with yourself. Nobody's going to know what your answers are. But I think as you write the answers, really reflect on being honest. So, am I really like that? Or do I think actually, so you might think, well, my first score is I want to score 9. But I want you to really reflect and think, well, actually, am I a 9 or am I more a 6? Because I think when we talk about exemplary leadership, one of the key things about exemplary leadership is insight. It's about having an understanding of how you are, of what your skills are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses. And ultimately, it's not just only the first part of having insight, but it's about then the second stage of what I'll ask you. So what are you going to do about those things where you score low numbers? So, okay, here we go. Number 1, honest. So to do the right thing when nobody is watching. So honest is about telling the truth. Honest is about fessing up. Honest is, if somebody leaves $500 in a desk drawer that you're using, that, the desk drawer isn't open, or if it is, that the money's there. The sort of basic stuff. To do the right thing when nobody's watching. So that's an absolute critical. And I put it close to the top because there have been so many examples of leaders that I've worked with over the time that, come across as these exemplary leaders, but aren't honest with themselves, aren't honest with their team. I mean, how many politicians do we see, right? Honesty. Number 2, inspiring. So they've got the energy and the passion. And, when we talk about inspiring, many people think, so sort of driven and passionate and out there and, everybody knows their passion. You can be very introverted and very inspiring. And I think inspiring is around really having a passion for something that you're doing, loving what you're doing, and putting energy behind that. And it's really interesting because people feel energy. You can walk into a room, introvert or extrovert, and people feel the passion. And so, if you think about your role in the work that you do? Are you passionate? Are you inspiring? Or is it just a job? Is it just, well, I get to go to where I need to go because I like it, but am I passionate? No. Is it something I want to do for the rest of my life, or would I like to do something similar for the rest of my life? Look, to be honest with you, Karen, it's just paying the bills. Okay, so score yourself for inspiring. Dependable. So another word for dependable, ladies and gentlemen, is to show integrity. So you do what you say you will do. So an example would be that, you know, you say to yourself, okay, well, you say to your team, I will make sure I come back to you on Friday. So Friday is not Monday and it's not Tuesday, it's Friday. And you do everything you possibly can to make sure that you are doing what you say you will do, because it sounds silly and it sounds so little, but people actually take notice of that. Your team, people who rely on you to do what you say you will do, is one of the most important things that you can do as a leader. And for example, if you cannot come back on a Friday, then you might say on Thursday night, email them or phone them and say, look, I can't come back tomorrow because of this, that, but I will come back to you early next week. Dependable is critical. You cannot be an exemplary leader if you're not dependable. Compassionate. So compassionate is to see it from somebody else's perspective, not to understand exactly how they feel, because you can't. To understand exactly what they're going through, because you can't. So even though, for example, you might have been in a situation where a family member passed away and you were really distraught, and you've got a team leader who's got a family member who's just passing away, and you feel you understand what they're going through, please be mindful of the fact that you cannot, because you're a different person. So one of the key things you never say to your people is, I understand what you feel, because you can't. You can say something like, I can appreciate that you're really struggling at the moment. Or you could say something like, I can see that you're really, really upset. That's compassion, as opposed to, I understand how you feel. So are you able to show compassion to your people on a regular basis? What's your score out of 10? Emotional control, emotional control is all about being able to manage your emotions when you're angry or you're distressed. So there's nothing worse than being, a leader or working for somebody who screams and shouts. And I'm not suggesting you do, but maybe sometimes you do. Or even maybe worse than that. I think when you're talking about shouting and screaming, there's energy behind that. So some people will be frightened about that. But some people would say, well, at least I can see that he or she's got some emotion. The other side of emotional control is somebody who's so well controlled that you don't know what's going on. So they show no emotion. When we're talking about emotional control, I'm coming back to Obama. So he can get quite upset or emotionally moved about something. In this documentary, there was a vignette with him about there was a shooting at one of the schools, and 23 6-year-old children were taken out, were killed. And there was part of the documentary was actually watching him go into the school and hug the parents and do a speech. And he had to stop his speech halfway through because he was actually crying. He was actually weeping. But he looked down and he just stood there very composed, and he just took a handkerchief and he wiped his face. But he was very composed, and then he just kept going. And then he, sort of another 5 or so minutes later, he got upset again, and he composed himself, and he kept going. And that's what I'm talking about, emotional control. And so score yourself out of 10 for that. Competence in tasks and relationships. I talk about this wherever I train, and I've got a smile on my face because there's some of you, and as I said, there's a lot of you on the line, but there's some of you who I work with, and some of you I even work with this week. And I often talk about competence in tasks and relationships. So historically, we know that, if we're going to be a senior leader, we've got to be really good at the task. So what our goals are, what the departmental goals are, what are we supposed to be doing to achieve what we have to achieve. And that's all well, and generally leaders tend to be good at tasks, otherwise they don't last in the role. But interestingly, also important is your relationships. So how are you able to form relationships? Are you all of the things 1 to 5? Are you honest? Are you inspiring? Do your people depend on you? Would they see you as compassionate? Are you good at relationships and tasks? So maybe if you'd like to score yourself 1 out of 10 for tasks and 1 out of 10 for relationships, if that's easier for you. 7, fair in all your dealings. No favorites. Oh my gosh, the worst leader is one who job for the boys or job for the girls, and you've got a clear understanding of the inner circle and who are the outer circle. You can never be an exemplary leader when you treat your people differently. Now here's the thing, and I think it's an important thing. I think we're all drawn to some people as opposed to other people, and I think we always will be attracted to some people, that you get on with better, so you're going to have a coffee with those people more than those people, or you might be more encouraged to have lunch with this crowd as opposed to that crowd. I think that's a natural human endeavor that we tend to, connect with some people more than others. But exemplary leaders, you wouldn't know who they connect with more than others, because they treat each other all the same. They spend time equally with their people. They spend time coaching their people in a formal or informal capacity. They spend time, and you wouldn't know who they would regard as closer to them or not. So what's your score? Collaborative, let's do this together. So it's about getting people involved and working together as opposed to, again, leaving some out or doing it on their own. How often, as I said earlier, do you have it where we don't delegate? If you don't delegate, you're not being an exemplary leader, ladies and gentlemen. Do we work together to solve the problem? So what we also often talk about is in a team. Do we work together in a team? But here's another concept. Do we work as a team with other parts of the organization's teams? Or do we just stick in our own area and not think about the fact that if we've got another team in another country or another town or another region or another part of the organization, they're also your siblings, if you like, in the organization. Do we collaborate with them or do we ignore them? So how good are you at collaboration? 9, broad-minded, open to new things. Oh my gosh, how important is this? I was working with Harry. I'll give you the example of Harry. So Harry I was working with probably about 10 years ago, and Harry had a really great little business, and it was, let's say he was selling widgets. It wasn't, but we'll say he's selling widgets. And when I went, Harry asked me to go and help him turn his organization around. Harry he wasn't on a computerized system, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just say all of the sales that they made were done manually. So they were written in a book. And, they were recorded and the people got an official receipt that was handwritten. Now, that way of doing business went out with the ark, with the dinosaur, right? And I remember saying to him, Harry, you've got to open your mind to be, bigger things here. We've got to get onto computer. We've got to use, some sort of accounting software. We've got to use some sort of, sales processing tool. No, Karen, my father did it this way, and this is the best way to do business. So I remember saying to him, Harry, you're going to go out of business. Well, I think 2 years after I said to him, Harry, I can't work with you because you're not broad-minded. You're not open to new things. He went under. His business didn't survive. So think about you and your role. Are you open to some of the suggestions that your people make? Or is it no, that we better just stick to what we know because it's more comfortable, and therefore we're going to stick with this? So how broad-minded are you? Are you imaginative and creative in the way that you work? Or again, is it, rather the things we know? Now, some of us are more theoretical. We like the tried and proven ways of doing things. So we tend to stick with, the bars, the graphs, the statistics, the evidence. And that's fine. But is there an opportunity that we could try things to be more creative and do things differently? Could we bring in a new process? Give it a go at least. Could we pilot a program that we've never run before, but give it a go? Is it okay that we encourage our people to try things differently? And even, here's the worst thing, if it doesn't work out and it fails, well, at least you could have said, hey, you know what, I gave it a go, and more importantly, I encourage my people to give it a go, and then your people see you as that sort of guy or girl that they can go to as a leader who's encouraging of their ideas and new ways of doing things. So do you allow your people to be imaginative and creative because you are? Okay, so 10. So let's keep going. 11, you've got vision, and you know where you're taking your troops and where you're going. Comes back to what I said earlier about the boat and having a vision. Do we know where we're going? So do you have a vision for, is it your team, or is it your department? Is it your region, or is it your organization? Are you clear about what you're doing, and are you clear about where you're wanting to take your people? So it's positive regardless of what's going on. The kind of leader that really, as I say, has the ability to stand tall, is able to see a situation for what it is, but is able to actually remain positive. So when things aren't going well, to still see the positive in things. Okay, well, I accept that this isn't working, but let's learn from this. You know, what can we take out of the situation that we don't do in the future? So instead of getting angry and negative, to be able to be positive regardless of what's going on, to remain upbeat. How good are you at that? 15, I love this. This is one of my absolute favorites. Stands by their people. They die on the sword to defend their troops. There's been so many examples in my professional life that I can give you where I've seen leaders who will sell their people out to defend their own image, reputation, or integrity. And I think I can appreciate why leaders might do that. But at the end of the day, if one of the people who are working under you have made a mistake, and let's just say it's cost the organization $20,000 for argument's sake. At the end of the day, you might be the senior leader, and then the board calls you in, and the board says, how come, $20,000 was wasted? There's been organizations and times where I've actually watched leaders really say, well, it was because of that person in my team who didn't do this. At the end of the day, when we talk about exemplary leadership, we're talking about regardless of what your people do, that you stand by them and you take on the accountability and the responsibility. I was watching a documentary about Douglas MacArthur the other day, who was, the American major, I think he was a general, actually major general, and he was leading the South Pacific troops in the Second World War, and he was talking about this exact thing, that, to stand by your people regardless of what happens. You are their leader, and you will defend them to the death. Obviously, you're not talking about people who steal or people who violate, organizational code of ethics. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about general people who are good people who try their hardest. Number 16, persistent and tenacious. So you will keep on doing things and you will hang in there because you believe in what you're doing, and you'll go again and again and again. I just wanted to say one thing about persistence is that they say that the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome, right? So when we talk about tenacity and persistence, it is about hanging in there and keeping on trying to get things done and to move forward. But if you are finding that what you're doing is just butting your head against a brick wall, then it is about changing what you're doing, not changing the outcome, but maybe changing the journey that you're trying to take to get to the outcome, but still remaining persistent and tenacious. I think that's really important, because too often I find leaders who'll try something but then give up, and what's the point? It'll never work. No, if you've got the passion and the dedication to believe that what you're doing will work, and you've got all the science to say that it will work, then it is about being persistent and tenacious to get to where you're wanting to go, but maybe changing the journey and how you're going to get there in the end. So what's your score? Determined, and I think it maybe goes a bit in with persistent and tenacious, but determined that no matter what, nothing's going to sway you. You're going to get there regardless, and I think that's an important thing around, exemplary leadership. I think this is a really one that I love. Courageous. The courageous leader is the leader who will stand up for something that they believe, even though everybody else they know stands against them. Are you prepared to hold on to what you believe is the right thing, or the honorable thing, or the correct way of doing something, and stand on your own if you have to? Or do you find that often you will kind of relent because you don't like to go against the flow, or you might feel that you'll get other people offside? I've just been asked by Stephanie, what was attribute 10 and 11? I'll go back, Stephanie. Let me just finish to 19 and 20, and I'll go back. Oh, I hope I didn't miss that, but if I did, well, no problem. I can go back and have a look. 19, loyal. Oh, my gosh. How many times I come across leaders that will talk about other leaders, or, I hate to say this and be so cheeky, backstab their colleagues, and will use things that their colleagues have done to promote their own cause up the corporate ladder. There is nothing worse, ladies and gentlemen, than a disloyal leader. Disloyal to their peers, disloyal to their managers, disloyal to their troops. In fact, when I think about all of these, I think that loyalty or disloyalty has to be one of the greatest curses of modern day leadership. It's about staying true to the people who you need to be true to. And when you think about loyalty basically goes in with all of these. And I'm not talking about, again, and I must reiterate, I'm not talking about loyalty to people who have done the wrong thing, people who have stolen or people who have used company property and none of that stuff. I'm talking about people who generally might make mistakes or not be the sort of people that you like and enjoy most. But it's about not being derogatory. It's about not being rude. It's not about not being disloyal. I had a grandmother who was the craziest grandmother, but she taught me something, and I think it's a really important point. And then my mother reiterated this, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, but I'll reiterate this. In exemplary leadership, if you have nothing nice to say, say nothing. So that's one, I want you to write this down. If you've got nothing nice to say, say absolutely nothing. Because exemplary leadership is about being seen to be somebody who is honorable and ethical, and somebody who other people can depend on not to tear them down. Fun and engaging. Fun and engaging with their people. Oh, so let's just spend 5 seconds on engaging. I appreciate that most leaders, and probably most of you on the line tonight, and as I said, there's many of you, most of you would say to me, Karen, the problem is I don't have the time. I'm too busy. Well, I say that if you say to me that you're too busy, you're missing the point. So if we go back to that, the fact is that leaders, your role is to be strategic, to do the strategy, and it's the people under you down the line whose job it is to actually execute the tasks. I'm not suggesting you don't have to as well, of course you do, but overall, the more you delegate and the more you drive responsibility and accountability down the line, and you develop your people to be competent, skilled, and capable, the more highly performing your team stroke organization, right? Now, if that theory holds true, then what it means is that you've got more time. In fact, I would say that one of your key performance indicators is to engage with your people. So that means going into your region and spending time with each of the people or the areas, the team leaders, and, with the teams down the line in the different regions. Or if you've got, a team that might be geographically in 2 different areas, then your role is to go and spend time in those 2 areas. If you are, for example, a team leader and you've got sales representatives, for example, who work under you. Let's say that they work 3 levels under you. One of the things I would say then is make sure that you leave the last Friday of every month available for your reps. And then what you do is for the rest of the year, you make sure that you've got the last Friday of every month with a rep on the road, and you go into the field with them. You take them for lunch. And you wouldn't believe how those little things, and they would go back to their mates and say, can you believe my boss came out on the road with me today? What an awesome woman. What an awesome guy. I can't believe that they're so busy and they did that to me, or that with me. And that is how you build up a sense of rapport and a sense of loyalty from your people. So if you say to yourself, I'm too busy, I'm saying you're missing the point. I'm saying that engaging with your people is a key aspect of what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to see if I can answer Stephanie's question, so bear with me whilst I go back on this PowerPoint. No, Stephanie, you were right. I missed 11. Did I? Yes, I did. 11 and 12. Don't you love that? Oh, that's okay, because I have 11 and 12 for you. So if you want to, thanks for letting me know, Stephanie. You were the only one that let me know. No, I skipped them. Okay, so number 11, here's the one, and I'm going to go back to one of the ones I mentioned earlier, but this is certainly emotional intelligence. Write that down, emotional intelligence. I've got it done as emotional control. Okay, so I'm going to then leave emotional intelligence out. Let's make another one. I'll give you this. Remains calm when things get heated. That's an absolutely key one. Remains calm when things get heated. So that would be number 11. Now, the reason why I say this is because even though you might say, well, that's like emotional control, it certainly is, but I think it probably needs to be put out there as a separate entity, because when I watch a lot of the leaders that I work with or I coach, it's those that I find that are very calm, regardless of the chaos that's going around them, that are able to still lead and to delegate tasks or to give direction when things are heated. So it could be in a meeting, it could be in a natural disaster that's taken place, it could be in a critical incident at work, it could be a whole range of different things that is happening around them, but they're able to stay absolutely solid. I think that's a really, really important point, that they're able to, again, remain calm when it sounds as if everything's just falling down around them. And I think that's really, really important. And I think the other one I'm going to add is number 12, because I think this is a really nice point as well, is that seeks counsel from their people. Seeks counsel from their people. So what I mean by that then is that seeks counsel means that they ask their people for input and contribution to decisions that need to be made. If they're not sure about a particular strategy, run it by their people down the line. If they're not sure about maybe a new product or maybe a new way of doing things, involve their people down the line. You know, things like what I always say. So there's some of you on the line who I work with, and you will respond to this. One of the key things is if you want to implement change in a team or an organization, get the people involved. So you get people from the region or people from, you know, the organization to be part of a change team. And by what we call a transformational team then is that you're seeking counsel from them. You're getting these people to be involved in the change that you're wanting to bring about, but you make them responsible. And so by seeking their counsel and getting them responsible, they feel as if they're part of something really, really important. And it sounds crazy, but it's those little things that make such a difference. Because those people then look at you as a leader and say, wow, do you know, Karen, that this is the first leader I've worked with that's actually even asked me what I think? Do you know, Karen, that this leader actually cares enough to get us involved in shaping the future of our team, region, organization? So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You have 20 of them now that I've added the other two. And I guess what I'm now going to ask you, so score yourself. You know, how did you go? How did you go in terms of your leadership? What was your score out of 24? Or I said 20, but I changed it to 10. So if you have a look at each of the 10, have a look at then the two lowest scores you gave yourself out of all of those 20. So let's say it was something, let's say you chose dependability and collaboration, right? What are you going to do about those two things moving forward to increase those scores? Because I think whilst it's one thing to actually acknowledge that those scores are low, I think the most important thing that it's about what are you going to do about that? You know, because I think one of the key things in leadership is that it's one thing to come up with an idea or an answer. And there's a saying that I remember learning many, many years ago, and this is it. So I'll say it slowly so you can write it down. And here it is. Many a plan of mice and men fall apart at the time of implementation. So I'll just say that again. Many a plan of mice and men fall apart at the time of implementation. So what that means is that the first thing is to look at what you need to do and to have a strategy. That's stage number one. The second stage is the implementation. And most initiatives, programs, leadership strategies fall apart in stage two, the stage of implementation. So something to think about. What are you going to do to increase your two lowest scores to move forward? And you're welcome, Steph. I'm glad that you did ask. I just wanted to come back to him. John F. Kennedy, you know, it's really interesting. I actually have got quite a few American friends, And it's really interesting when we had discussions about leadership, which I must tell you, I don't normally raise, they do, because they know the work I do. And whenever I get involved in having dinner with them or whatever, they'll ask me about this and ask me about that. And it's really interesting that with John F. Kennedy, there's a split down the middle between whether they think he was a great president or exemplary president or a crummy president. And I'll tell you what is really interesting. I think overall, from a political perspective, he was a very courageous leader. You know, the Bay of Pigs and going against the Cubans. And I think he was a visionary. I think he was groomed to be an exemplary leader from a very young age. And I think he had, out of all of the 20 characteristics, I think he had probably 18 of them, actually. I think he had 18 of them. But the two of them that he did not have were the two that actually split the American vote. And the two that he did not have, the first one he did not have was loyalty. So interestingly enough, he was not a loyal family man. So, you know, we all know, say, the media, but I think that there's truth in his relationship with Marilyn Monroe and all those kind of things. And I think he destroyed the great American family dream by that. So loyalty blew him out of the exemplary leadership water. And the second thing was honesty. He was not honest in those dealings. And so it's really interesting that, you know, you might see him as politically very strong, and he was, but personally he flawed, and therefore that personal flaw actually affected him ultimately as a leader of the American people, ultimately the most powerful nation in the world. So I have a manager assessment test, which I have, if any of you would like to get that from me, you're very welcome to email me. So it's a very simple test that I've given to some of you on the line. It's really simple, where you actually, it's like a little survey that you send to your team to ask them to assess you. It's not a 360 and one of those great, you know, long, laborious kind of feedback forms. It's quite simple. I put it together for one of my dearly loved clients on the line now, tonight actually. But I thought I'd like to actually give it to any of you who would like it. So what it is that you'd give it to your staff once a year, twice a year. And what they do is they just assess you. They just give you they tell you how they feel about how you are in various aspects of your job. And I think this is where you need to be courageous to actually take the feedback. But if you'd like to get a copy of that, you're very welcome to email me. So my email address is karen@puremagicbusiness.com.au for those of you who don't have it. karen@puremagicbusiness.com.au. So are there any questions on the line at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, whilst I'm moving forward? So how we can help, obviously I had to do a bit of a promo, why wouldn't I? How we can help, we run leadership and team development programs. As some of you know, we run a range of 24 one-day management and staff programs. We do coaching and leadership retreats. So the leadership retreats normally are 3 days. And generally the leadership retreats that we run are off-site. So I don't like to run them on-site because we take you away and really hone in on your leadership skills and teach you a range of different things. If you would like a free ebook, please feel free to go to puremagicbusiness.com.au. There's a free ebook on there for you. I'm not sure which one it is that's up there because they change. My marketing manager changes them. If you book any one program with us before June year end, you get a discount. Wow, I didn't even know that was on there. There you go. That's my marketing person. And I think if you book 2, you get 10%. Wow. Well, you've got a whole, 2 days? So, well, we're here, ladies and gentlemen, and for longer programs, well, that's a whole other program to discuss. So please mention the code 2360 when you book, and if you book, we would love you to, obviously, we'd love to work with you. How to book, which program you're interested in, just go see what we offer on Pure Magic Business, or you can email us on info@puremagicbusiness.com.au. Download your free book now, and the code is 2360. Okay, so here I sit. Are there any questions that any of you would like to ask me? There's a lot of you on the line still, so I'm happy to take any type of question and answer the question as you feel that you would like me to answer. Well, not as you feel you'd like me to answer, but as I feel is fit to answer it. So tell me what you'd like to know. Okay, so I've got a question here from Dan. Is there a difference between leadership and management? Yes, there is, Dan. There's a significant difference between leadership and management. So if you consider what management management really is about focusing on the details of doing the day-to-day tasks and the day-to-day work. So that could be doing the rostering, and that could be doing the pays, or that could be, cleaning the machinery. It could be servicing clients, or, finding homes for people as part of your role. So management, yes, is about the hands-on, what am I doing now, and what do we have to do to achieve these goals. Leadership really is more around strategy and overall vision and direction. So if you're wanting to sort of put it in a more kind of easy, practical definition, leadership is about the bigger picture, strategy, direction, and where are we going. And the management is the actual little things that we have to do to get to the destination or the vision of where we're wanting to go. And I think that that's an important thing. I'm also very often asked, so can you lead and manage at the same time? Oh, absolutely you can. In fact, many small businesses do. I often give the example of I run a small business. I run two businesses. One is leadership, obviously, and team development, but I run another business called Empowering Women to Thrive. And so the reason I'm sharing that with you is that because both are small businesses and that's how I want them to remain, there's a team of 5 core of us in the business, and we're surrounded by 8 or 9 very gifted trainers who I use where I go. And some I take overseas with me. But I often find myself where I'm leading, so I'm thinking strategically, and then half an hour later I'm actually managing. So I'm actually doing something that might be, well, today was a classic example, paying people, which might be part of a management role. But this morning I was thinking about a strategic direction in Fiji. So what we're going to do strategically in another country. So within half an hour I was both leading and managing, if that makes sense. Okay, and I've got another question from Sel, and Sel's asking me about consistency in leadership, and what impact does consistency or inconsistency have on leadership? Well, I think, if we talk about trust, I think that's probably the thing that I'm going to attach consistency to. When we talk about consistency, and we're talking about exemplary leadership, people working for leaders or working for people above them, we need to be able to trust those people for whom we work. We need to be able to know that they are trustworthy, that they are going to be consistent. We need to be able to know that they are going to do what they say they will do. We need to trust that they will always greet us in the morning. We need to know that they will be consistent in their mood. We need to know that they're going to be consistently the same sort of person, and they're not going to change all the time, or they're not going to be moody. So I think it's a really good question, Sal, because the more consistent, positively consistent, ladies and gentlemen, it can be negatively consistent, like you're a pain all the time or you're moody all the time, negatively consistent. Well, that's not going to get you anywhere, and neither is it going to get your team anywhere. So positively consistent, where you always positive, always reliable in the way that you approach things, always positive in the way that you come into work, and you're consistent in the fact that you greet your people, always consistent in how you treat them. That is certainly an aspect of exemplary leadership without any doubt. In fact, it's those leaders that are inconsistent, and people never know whether they're going to greet them or whether the leader's going to show any interest in them. I think that those leaders are not exemplary leaders, and I think what happens over time is that those leaders lose good staff. So that then leads me to another webinar I often run called How to Create and Maintain a Highly Performing Team. So, wow, ladies and gentlemen, I have actually been talking now to you for an hour. And so I just want you to know, if there's any other question, you're very welcome to shoot it through to me. you're very welcome to send it to me at my email address or at info@puremagicbusiness. I just want you to know how fantastic it has been speaking to you this evening. As I said, there's been a lot of you on the line. I really hope that you found it beneficial, and I really hope that you enjoy the webinars. I run them every month. It's because I, want to share a lot of the stuff that I know, and I think it's really important for my clients who come on the line and for those who are new that don't know you yet, but hopefully I can work with you or we can work with you. But, if you do enjoy them, please let us know, because it's always nice. It's always nice to know that you're enjoying what we're doing, because it's very difficult in terms of I don't see you, but I can actually listen to you, through your questions or through your emails. Do you get any CPD point for attending? Well, it depends on what it is that you're after. But if you would like we'd like to talk about that to me. I don't know what organization you're part of or what association you are part of. I don't know whether they would recommend it or recognize a webinar as a point towards your CPD, but if so, I'm happy to give it to you. But what you would need to do is you need to just email me at Karen@PureMagicBusiness. You're in nursing, I see. I'm very happy to give you a certificate of attendance on the webinar, and then you would have to check with your association, your organization, whether they would recognize an hour's webinar as contributing towards your professional development. So contact me, Malvinia. I'm happy to help you. Thank you, people. It's been wonderful. It's been fantastic, and I really hope that you've enjoyed it. So please contact me. Let me know whether you enjoyed it or if you'd like anything else. I'm very happy to help you. So God bless. Lovely chatting, and speak to you next month. Take care. Bye.